That's hard to fake, man. Professional athlete, astronaut. You been to space? Oh yeah. Really, like space. Yeah.
It's like that one movie, that Leonardo DiCaprio was in, Catch Me If You Can.
Oh, okay.
Like he pretended to be a pilot for like 5 years and people just believed him.
Here's the funny thing. Was he a pilot?
No. Didn't he like
He was.
run away from school and drop
He ran away from home because his parents cut him off.
Okay. So children of divorced parents can't be pilots.
No,
No, fun!
You guys are terrible.
No, I was just saying that that's like an example of what he's saying.
Oh yeah. But my question is, how could he pretend to be a pilot for 5 years?
Or 2 or whatever, how long.
Whatever it is. Even if it's once. Even if it's one day, how could he pretend to be that? What did he have to do in order to pretend to be that?
Lie?
Yeah.
He learned certain things about being a pilot. I remember he learned
He didn't have to prove it.
saving things.
So he had the suit, you know that?
And he didn't have to prove it.
But didn't he? Did he just sit in the cab? Where was he while he was pretending to be a pilot?
Well, he moved around.
No, I mean physically.
Um,
Where was his body?
In the plane.
Think obvious, what?
In the plane.
In the plane. Where in the plane was he?
he sounded, he wasn't co-pilot, he wasn't pilot, he was like the pilot.
Where the flight attendants sit?
No, he wouldn't sit in the flight. He would sit in the cockpit.
There you
He would hang out with the pilots. He would do enough to be a pilot. So I'll ask again, was he a pilot?
Yeah.
Didn't he do pilot stuff? I mean, if I step onto the field at Dodger Stadium and I swing the bat even just once, aren't I a professional athlete now? If he piloted a plane, doesn't that make him a pilot? He didn't have the training. He wasn't getting a paycheck for it, but he was helping fly a plane. I'm not saying he was or wasn't, but I think it's worth thinking about. Aren't you the thing that you do? Aren't we the things that we do? Sure, he said that he was something, and sure, he said he was lots of things, but when he was the thing that he did, just like the rest of us. We are the things that we do, not just the things that we say. The things that we say are incredibly important, and we discount them too much. The things that we say we discount too much, but we do that to ourselves. All right, I wonder if any of you are that person that when you mean no, you'll say maybe. Like, can we go to the mall tomorrow? Maybe. But you really mean no? I wonder how many of you are that person that when someone asks you, can we go to the mall tomorrow? And you say, maybe. You really mean maybe. I hope you're that second person. But I interact with people all the time and I'll say something like, can we do whatever next week? Maybe. Oh, that means no. Man, who hurt you? But I know what it is. It's because that's a parental way of saying no because they don't want to just say no. But now the problem becomes now, what if you really do mean maybe? How could you possibly say it without the word maybe? It's not possible. In other words, we pull that meaning out of the word, and now that makes it impossible for us to communicate in certain ways. It's just like if we take the word love and we pull all the meaning out of it, and then when you tell someone, I love you, and they're like, what do you mean by that, though? Well, I mean exactly what it says. Okay, but when you say that, do you mean... And then we get into these conversations where we're having to try to explain some concepts that should be relatively straightforward, even if complex, even if complicated. When I asked that question, yeah, but who are you? I asked that because, anybody remember? I asked that question 36 weeks ago, and many times since then. And that's kind of the culmination of what a lot of this stuff is. The thing in the universe that you should know the most about is a lot of times far more mysterious to us than even quantum physics, which is to know ourselves, to know why we are the way that we are, to know why we do the things that we do. And it's difficult because as much as we like to talk about ourselves, as much as we like to think about ourselves, there's a limit to it because we don't want to go too deep into it. We like to think of ourselves in terms of the things that we think are a benefit to us. but being able to delve down deep inside of ourselves, for a lot of us, it seems like there's more harm there than good that we can do because of what we could possibly discover. With Lowen here, once we give up our true self to play a role, well, I asked that question of how do we know what our true self is? If you're imitating other people, are you your true self? Yeah, in a sense. Is there anything that you learned how to do in your life that you didn't learn how to do by imitating? There's very few things. Your speech patterns. I bet that if I talked to your parents, I would probably hear your speech patterns in them. I have a friend who does the, I'll try to imitate it, but I'm going to mess it up. She does like this fake laugh thing all the time, right? She catches, like when you say something snarky and like you catch yourself and you try not to laugh, you know? Like someone will say something snarky, like, I don't know, like, I don't know. I can't even think of snarky stuff to say. That's how unsnarky I am. I'll try to make the laugh. Someone will just say, oh, Diet Coke is better, whatever. Like, you know, the whole, like, you're trying to stop yourself from laughing. And I pointed this out to my friend, and she like, I do that? I go, yeah. And the way I pointed it out to her was I was talking to her about, she has a daughter, a little girl, and the girl's like 7 or so, and the little girl does it. And I commented and said that she has her mom's speech patterns. And my friend was like, what do you mean? And I told her, and you know, she'll say something, she'll be, and she'll go, I do that? Yeah, heck yeah, you've never noticed this. And it's true, she never noticed about herself. And then she started paying attention to it, and she realized, oh shoot, I do that. So where does she get it from? I would bet that if I talk to the rest of her family, she probably gets it from them as well. They probably do the same thing. And so there's so much of us that's not original, that it completely gets past us, and yet we complain about people who are unoriginal. Oh, you're just imitating other people. Well, we all are. If you're very lucky, I shouldn't say lucky, sorry. If you're one of those outstanding people who comes along who's truly, who's a different kind of a thinker, like I talk about Nietzsche all the time, Friedrich Nietzsche. You should get tired of hearing about him by now. But I talk about him so much, not because I agree with the guy, but because he's such an incredibly original thinker. There's nobody before Nietzsche who thought like him. And the amazing thing is that since Nietzsche, there are hundreds of millions of us who think like him, without even realizing where it comes from, without even knowing why we do it. And before him, we think of like there was a common sense way of thinking about the world. But he's one of those central figures who, when he shows up, all of a sudden, he only sold like 1,500 books in his lifetime. He was a failed author in his own time. He dies after going insane. His life was not one of great success in his own time. But since then, I mean, it's phenomenal. Wouldn't it be great to be able to go back and see that kind of stuff? What influence you had? Anybody in here, did I mention it before? Anybody in here ever watched that show, Doctor Who? I never watched it before, but I came across this one scene on YouTube. It almost makes me want to watch the show. Almost. But it's about, as far as I can tell, it's about a guy who goes back in time, and he interacts with historical figures. Anyway, there's the scene that I saw where the main guy, Doctor Who, goes back in time, and he interacts with Vincent van Gogh, the painter. And in his own time, Van Gogh was a failure. He cut off his own ear. He painted, I'll leave that. He was just a failed painter, and he was also an incredibly, I say melancholy figure, but he suffered tremendously, emotionally, psychologically, and he endured some of the worst circumstances that you can imagine for a person of his time, and yet he's able to take all of that pain and transform it into making incredible beauty when you watch his paintings. And that's this distinction. There are people who get hurt in life, and then they turn around and they try to hurt others. And they'll justify it in lots of ways. Like, well, I'm just giving what I got, and it's essentially the same as like a 3-year-old who gets angry and has a temper tantrum. You just put them into an adult's body, and then you carry out that trauma for the rest of their lives, and you carry out the damage for the rest of their lives as well. it's an incredibly narcissistic and immature way of approaching life. And then there are people who get hurt and they suffer, and then they turn around and they somehow make something productive out of it. Because wouldn't it be terrible if the result of all of your suffering was just to multiply suffering? Wouldn't it be so much better if the result of all of your suffering was to turn around and somehow use it to make the world a better place? And I mean to make the world a place with just a little bit less suffering for other people. You know? And so the doctor who goes back in time, he gets Vincent van Gogh and he brings him to the modern day. And he takes him to a modern day exhibition of his work. And of course he looks like Van Gogh, but no one recognizes him because he's the guy from the paintings, but he's not the guy from real life. And Dr. Who grabs a hold of this one scholar and asks him, "Hey, we met yesterday." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I guess I guess earlier in the show they met the day before." So he asked him, in the whole spectrum of painting, where does Vincent van Gogh rate? And Van Gogh is standing nearby. He can hear if he's not facing the guy. And then the guy says, "Oh, that's a big question." And he goes on to explain a lot of what I just said, that this is a guy who created intense beauty. And he said, so not just the fact that he was one of the greatest painters to ever live, he said, I think he's one of the finest men to ever live. Now imagine if you're Van Gogh and in your own lifetime you're poor and you're failing and no one appreciates your work and you don't even appreciate your own work. And you just think that your life came to absolutely nothing, and yet you can hear this thing from someone 100 years from now, remembering who you were. You know? That's incredible. This weekend I'm going up to Los Angeles. I'm going to deliver a eulogy for a man I never met. A guy who died and I never met him before. And yet I was asked to speak at his funeral. And what's funny is I did an internet search for him. He was a guy who taught Jiu Jitsu up there. And my professor, the guy who teaches me Jiu Jitsu, he was that guy's student. And there was just something about when this guy died. I'll just say he killed himself. But there's something about the way that he kind of lived, that you sat there and you're just like when you hear his students talk about him online, you just sit there and go, well, this was no ordinary man. This guy was something very special. And then you look at all of his life and you can identify the same thing: intense suffering. And it's intense suffering that he somehow managed to turn around and create something beautiful out of. He has several students who now go off and they teach Jiu Jitsu, and then in Jiu Jitsu there's something really like lineage and like where you come from is really important. If any of you were to, if any of you guys knew some stuff about Jiu Jitsu, and then you rolled with me, like you sparred me, and then you did a few rounds with me, and you were kind of paying attention to it, and then you rolled with my professor, you would sit there and go, oh yeah, that's right, you're learning Jiu Jitsu from Trevor. That's my professor, Trevor, because you can see in my movements and everything that I'm getting it from this guy. There's some learning that happens there. And that's one of those beautiful things as a teacher, that you can sit there and go, that's amazing, because what I'm doing right now is transferring into the student who then someday is going to teach a few things to somebody else. And in this way, this thing that you've dedicated your life to, this art, is going to be perpetuated down these lines. And so I started, again, I never met the man. I wish I had, because I kept saying, I'm going to go up and meet this guy, because I'd heard so much about him. And he has a school up in Antelope Valley, which is like on the far side of Los Angeles. And I kept thinking, I'm going to go up there and meet this guy. I'm going to go up there and meet this guy. During break, I'm going to drive up there and meet this guy. I never met the guy. Now it's too late. I guess I'm going to meet part of him on Saturday and Sunday, but I did a search for his name, and his name is Dan Howard. And it's really funny because when you search for Dan Howard Jiu Jitsu, like the 5th search down is a question. It asks, has anyone heard of Dan Howard? So I click on it, and it's a forum post where they're talking about him. And it's neat because the 5th, like when you go into the comment section, Dan Howard somehow is on that post, and he finds out that they're asking who he is. So he gets in there, and you can read it. Incredibly humble man. I mean, one paragraph, there's got to be a dozen misspellings. You know, his grammar sucks, and so does his punctuation. But that's not what he's there for. What he's there, and as he explains essentially, is, I'm a teacher. And you see that in all of his work, that there are people who he somehow made so incredibly passionate about what they do that, I mean, God, I'm even more embarrassed now than I was a couple months ago that I never met the guy, because this is a guy who was worth learning from. You know? It was actually really neat. One of my students told me that she went to go see that movie, Bad Guys, is it? Yeah, Bad Guys. And she said that while she was watching it, she realized that she was a shark. Is there a shark in the movie?
Yeah.
Okay. I think she said that she realized that she was the shark. And she was talking with her mom. So I guess her and her mom and they took like her little brother or something like that. And she was explaining to her mom about how symbolically she's this shark. And like she was just going on about the personality and so forth. And about building walls, and she said that she remembers something about a knight and dragons, but wearing the armor makes things worse, if you remember. And then he said that as she was driving, her mom just asked her, "Did you get this from Scanlon?" and her mom knows my name, and I was like, wow, that's pretty cool, man. And it's not that she's repeating anything necessarily that I'm saying, it's that these ideas are appealing to her in a certain way. That you sit there and go, wow, something did get picked up. Does that mean, therefore, that the jiu-jitsu that I do is not my own? Of course not. I got it from Trevor got it from Dan, but you take things and you kind of become, you don't necessarily, you imitate first, and then you make things your own. This is a girl who, person I'm talking about, she's doing a summer internship, summer program thing over at Stanford. It's a really cool program she got invited to. And as the time goes by, she's going to take some of the things, of course, that she's learned here, and then she's going to make them entirely her own. But there's still going to be that one little thread that's in there. And that one little thread that's in there is the influence that you've had. Hopefully, all of you, though, becomes this thing right here, which is authentic. To be authentic. You're authentic if you are, how do I say it? Authentic. You can quote me on that. You are authentic if you are authentic. If you're real. What that means is you're not pretending to be anything other than what you are, but you are being exactly what you are. Some of you are a perfect amalgamation, a perfect blending of your mother and your father. And you're going to hate me for pointing that out. And you're going to hate yourself even more for realizing it's true. And then as time goes on, you're going to love the fact that you are this thing. And it's interesting because even if you've never met one or the other, you're still going to have these traits that are going to remind people about that person. Now the thing though is that if you are that thing, that's what you should be. What we oftentimes will do is we'll try to deny the thing that we are. And we'll try to be something other than what we are. And then that means that we're going to be inauthentic. And there are a number of ways of being authentic. A number of ways of being authentic. You're authentic when what you say is what you actually believe. And it's not just, and by the way, this is important to do. You know, to say it, to think it, of course, to do things. But this is one that's really, really important to do. In other words, there's something about when there's an idea that's in your head, it resides entirely 100% in your head. It's nowhere else. But once you speak it, you've now in a certain way brought it into the world. In quite a literal way, sound waves are physical. Sound waves are physical. So as soon as you say something, you physically bring it into the world. And we miss this, or we underplay this. We don't realize the importance of something like that. Realize that if you have an idea that you never speak, it never comes into being. It never comes into existence. And so a big part of being, and there's this word that, man, if I had a semester with you on just one thing, maybe we could get to the bottom of this idea of what it is to be, being. It sounds like such an obvious thing to us, but it's really not. And what it is to be and to exist is so, it's so mind-boggling that even right now thinking about how I would even go about starting to teach something like that, I would say, my God, we need a semester and to understand this idea of being in existence. Because it's just, you ever stop and think that you're here, you know? And even by me saying this comment of you are here, This one statement right here contains so much that we seem to understand, but we take for such incredible granted. First off, we're still trying to figure out what this is, right? And you know that we're never going to get through a single day in this class where I'm not going to ask you what this is, this idea of you. Are, this is talking about something about being intensely connected with the idea of are. Not will be, not were, but present this one moment. There's different ways of looking at the universe. You can see, like, for example, Heraclitus, who's saying that the universe is always becoming. It never is right now. Because the moment that you start to process is right now, the moment that you start to contemplate the present moment is now gone. Remember from Pater. The second that you start to contemplate the present moment, it's now gone. So there is no are in that kind of you. There's only becoming. There's a terrible melancholy in that, because that means that there is no present moment. There's no stability. But there's something beautiful in that, because it means that with constant change, you can become almost anything that you want to be. You just can't celebrate it in the moment because there is no are. And if you're confused, that's because we don't have a whole semester to learn what that means. And then this idea of where here is such a difficult idea to get our heads around entirely. So we use phrases like this, just in passing. You are here. Okay, I think I know what you mean. But it's such an intensely deep idea. The fact that there's a you who can make this comment is mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. We take it for granted because you are, and you don't know what it's like not to be. Someday you will, but today you don't know what it is to not be. And so there has to be a you that can even make this statement. And that's why we spend so much time on this. Who are you? What are you? The you that makes this present statement. It's not a trivial thing, because you are the thing that perceives the world. You are the thing that perceives the universe. You are, as I said, the universe trying to understand itself. You're a part of that. A big part of that. And so we can't downplay the importance of knowing what this thing is. But we do. And what's worse is that we treat this thing as though it doesn't matter in so many ways. We treat this thing so badly in so many ways. And not just the I, but the you as well. In other words, not just you yourself, but everybody around us. And you look at the world, and if you ever need an understanding of how the world is not rational, that's all the evidence that you actually need for that. Now, if you never bring these things into being, if you never say the things that you think, if you don't have the courage to think the things that you would think, if you never have the courage to do what you are, then here's the problem. This thing right here never does this. It never comes into being. You never become. You never exist. What exists is an avatar of you that is full of asterisks. You know, I'm going to say not everything I think. Well, then what you think is never going to come into existence. And that means that you are fully never going to come into existence. If you don't have the courage to think these things, then you are never going to be. You're never going to exist. There will be something approximating you. It'll be you minus the things that you want to say, and you minus the things that you want to do, and you minus the things that you want to think. But that means that what's really coming into existence is something that looks more like that than a full you. And I mean, what are you here for, if not to be, if not to exist, if not to come into existence? And how do you do that? Well, you bring yourself into existence. First things first, what do? You speak it, you have to think it, you have to have an idea. It's the logos, it's the central idea. And then you say it, and all of a sudden, boom, you physically bring it into the world through sound waves. You actually say it. And now the last thing there is to do it. So make sure that the things that you're thinking are things that are worth saying and are worth doing, because these things are intimately connected. If it's not worth doing, it's not worth thinking about or saying. But don't use that as an excuse not to do it because it's easier. None of us is 100% authentic, is 100% real. 100% unique. I asked you, like, where do you get your speech patterns from? Why do you dress the way that you dress? Why do you, I mean, it's true. And, well, we get angry at people for that, but you should imitate. That's how you learn how to do what you do. But now the question is, do you stick, are there differences between what you learn how to do and the things that you actually are? Now that you've learned the rules, now that you've learned how to play guitar, can you play your own songs? Or are you going to play other people's songs the rest of your life when you have the ability, when you have ideas for things? It's easier not to write your own songs. Of course, it's easier to play other people's things. It's easier to do what everybody else does. And if that's who you really are, there's no problem with that. And there is value in it. If all of us ran around and did our own things, there would be no airplanes. There would be no buildings. We do have to kind of go along to get along. But the question starts to become in everyone's life is, what's that balance between being entirely authentic, or at least being entirely yourself, if you want to say, and not doing things, and then going along. There are people who are really uncompromising, and we know who they are. And they're very difficult to be around. But they're also admirable people to be around. But they're hard people to be around, because, they're uncompromising. And they're great until we disagree with them. And then we realize just how uncompromising they really are. I remember one of my students one time, he liked the fact that I would play jokes on people. And then one day he asked me for, I had to take these balls of sparkling ice, and one of my refrigerators, can I get one? I said, absolutely. And he's talking to me, I reached and I grabbed one, and then I grabbed it, I'm doing this to it, and I hand it to him, and he opens it up, and the thing just explodes all over him. And he's like, oh, and it was like the, excuse me, it was the pink one. So it was really sticky, And he was just like, and it got all over the floor, whatever, man. You had to sacrifice a little bit for the lulz, And he's just like, what happened? I said, I shook it up a lot before I gave it to you. He's like, why? I go, dude, I'm doing stuff for the mischief. And he actually said, I didn't think you'd do it to me. I go, well then, perfect. You never suspected it. Well, what do you think's going to happen? Of course I'm going to play a joke on you once in a while. That doesn't mean I don't like you. It means I do like you, and I like the lulz even more. Yeah, but uncompromising people are kind of like that as well. When you might think like, oh my gosh, I never thought you would turn on me. Well, what do you think they were going to do? That is what they do. But they're hard. They're easy to admire, difficult to be around. So we're caught in this vicious cycle that keeps closing in, diminishing our life, and damn it, that word at the end again, being. This whole notion of being. Very difficult. Very difficult. What I would suggest to you is that if you're not being authentic, you don't exist. Something akin to you exists. Something like you exists, but you actually don't exist. And wouldn't it be a horrible thing to get through this whole life at the end of all of it? Because if you're going to suffer, shouldn't you suffer for what you really are? Don't we all hate it when you ever been accused of something that you didn't actually do? And that's way worse than being accused of something that you actually did do. I wonder if you've ever suffered for something that you didn't actually do. And when you're being accused of it, you are suffering in a certain sense for that. Wouldn't it be so much better if we could get through life and you have to accept the suffering that's in life? Again, I said it on the first day that I ever met you guys, life is suffering. And we don't get to choose not to suffer. If we're fortunate, we have freedom, we get to choose what we're going to suffer for. And if you only learn one thing that I teach you this whole year, I hope it's that. And I hope it's that you set your mind to finding the things that are worth suffering for. The things that help you to transcend that suffering. Because if you can do that, that gives you a why. And if you have a why, well, you can find any how. You can find a way to get through it. And so, and if you don't believe that, ask your parents. So wouldn't it be better to go through life and be authentic and suffer for something that you actually are, rather than suffer for something that you aren't? I don't know. That's not true. I do know. But I'll tell you I don't know.
You know everything.
What's that?
You know everything.
But I'll end the way I began, with the pose, saying, I think you're right. No, I don't. I don't know anything. That's why I'm up here talking about this stuff. I'm trying to figure it out. I will. I'll figure it out when I'm older. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?